The very next day, this man, the CEO of Chertoff Group, was in the news talking about how we needed body scanner tech in hotels.
Do you want to know how blatantly, transparently obvious this agenda is? The next day, former Homeland Security official Chad Sweet, who just so happens to also be the co founder and CEO of the Chertoff Group, went on CNBC, and not only did he say that in a free society there are no ways to eliminate security risks.
In a free society, there's no way to eliminate this kind of risk.
So, what he really means is we need to be less free if we want to be safe. We need to give up our liberty for temporary security. He was also pushing, guess what?
But there are ways, as you said, to potentially mitigate the risk. In addition to intelligence sharing, you can also do a number of steps to establish a secure perimeter using various types of screening technology.
That's right, the X-ray technologies. Already, not even 24 hours later. So I guess the guy in the 4chan group just so happens to have had a crystal ball. That is what I call eerily prescient.
The very next day. Yeah.
The very next day.
Very next day, he's right on there. That's amazing. I mean, that 4chan post, like well ahead of time, pointing this out. I'm stunned by that, of course, but not surprised.
Yeah. It's unbelievable, Clayton. I mean, it's really unbelievable. And it was unbelievable to a number of people. And they wrote about it. And so it was covered in Unilad. It was covered on Snopes. And it was my recollection that shortly after that 4chan post kind of started to percolate into public conversation, this story dropped out of the news cycle. There were no more pushes for body scanner tech. There was no more discussion of the shooting. It was like it never happened. You would have the anniversary reports and other things, but that was the extent of it. Um, Insider trading was revealed, so that was interesting, and there was a number of short sales on the MGM stock that was anomalous. So that was another feature. And then this was curious. This is interesting for the public to understand. I made an effort to put some of this information onto Wikipedia, and I understood that if I just put it as an explanation of what happened, it was likely going to be removed. So I tried my very best to at least introduce it into the conspiracy section of the article which discussed the event. And so I properly sourced it, coded it, and added it to Wikipedia. And so here you'll see that Wikipedia discusses one 4chan post where they talked about the shooter Paddock being a Democrat, blah, blah, blah. And then just below it, I add this section here and I source it. I even say that the specificity is claimed unproven according to Snopes, etc. Well, to this day, that will not stand. The editors on Wikipedia will not allow this section of text to exist. They do not want you to see that text. This is the current entry, missing that very important part. And today, Chertoff's group is running security for the Supreme Court. So, what are we all doing? All right, let's talk about a conspiracy cover up. It seems to be evident that the body in the room was not Paddock. There were likely shots coming from additional locations and specifically from the airspace. A number of people look at that and they're muzzle flash, muzzle flash, muzzle flash. It's obvious. The FAA was hiding the records. I mean, there's so many reasons to look at this. And so one of the things that happened in the research community was there was a notion of an exfil. So a couple weeks after the conversation shifted towards maybe they're shooting from helicopters, you get this information being put out there that there was a rooftop exfil and that the Saudis were involved and that it had something to do with MBS and that these helicopters were running cover for this other event and they were trying to protect the prince. I mean, it's this elaborate, exotic, and frankly ridiculous narrative that got pushed out into the theory world to try to explain what had happened. And my conjecture is that this ridiculous story is actually probably also been pushed to our intelligence committees in the Congress and the Senate. And that they don't have enough of the true fact pattern to understand that they're being lied to. And if they are approached by members of the public saying, hey, what happened in Vegas doesn't mesh with the story that we're told, that their own internal conversations have been steered, somebody has steered them into thinking that this is some national security event related to Saudis, and so therefore they're not going to look into it. That's conjecture on my part, but it wouldn't surprise me. One of the pieces of information that has led many in the research community to think that maybe there's this exfil going on is that on Flight Radar 24, there is a GPS mismatch between the Southwest flight location where it's localized on the screen and where it actually is. And it makes it look as though this plane lands on top of the Mandalay Bay. And so, in the exceptional documentary by Mindy Robinson about what happened in Vegas, she discusses what she kind of jokingly refers to as a planecopter or something along those lines. And she's not wrong. It looks as though it's a plane that goes and stops on the top of the hotel. But what's actually happening there, when you compare it to the air traffic control audio, is it's just a misregistration, because you can hear the traffic controllers speaking to the Southwest pilots and telling them to land on a particular runway and then make a particular turn, which coincides exactly with what you see in this screen recording of the plane landing on the runway. So whoever concocted the exfil story, I think, latched onto this and thought that they could use it to bolster their chaff, that they threw out to evade discovery. Well, who benefited from all of this? Some other independent media companies and outlets did a good job of looking at this, but this was really the great purge on social media and independent media, where Facebook, Instagram, YouTube were just dumping sites left and right. My conjecture is that it was probably related to the truth of the Vegas shooting, and that they really went hard on removing channels because of that fact. I did a podcast with a friend of mine, Jeremy Sladen, about a year ago, and this is a really nicely done interview as well, if you guys want to watch that also, but you'll get a lot of information there. And the curious thing about this particular interview is that his Rumble channel comments were deleted. And I know of no other instances where Rumble has had comments deleted. Rumble's been pretty clean about that. And one of the comments that had been listed or gone to the top had stated that Paddock was a CIA contractor who had left the room earlier that afternoon. True or not, who knows? But that was there. All the comments get deleted. And then the very first comment that gets posted afterwards is a link to a video which steers people towards the narrative that it was an exfil operation. So I think it's a coordinated information warfare tactic to effectively remove actual information, steer folks towards this other explanation, obfuscate, and potentially get away with mass murder. That YouTube channel that it links to did have some interesting comments from the public. Free speech, folks. We need discourse. We can learn a lot from listening to one another. And so that's a veteran discussing the fact that the optical signature is clearly muzzle flash. And then I thought this was pretty good too, because with respect to whether or not it was exfil or something related to the Saudis versus whether it was this body scanner tech profiteering endeavor, the 4chan release, as well as the insider trading, all happened several weeks before the event, whereas Al Walid's invite to MBS, it should read MBS, was only 1 week before the shooting. So I think on its face, the notion that there was some sort of Prince exfil thing is ridiculous. Why would it make any sense to have a shooter in a room firing away at tens of thousands of people to create a distraction for something? I think it fails on many fronts. And so let's talk about the investigation. So there were efforts made to reach out to our public officials and our professionals to try to get some answers and some resolution. And so, in the appeals processes, many people were copied, to get the information out there. And this is a list of some of those that were reached. I had faith in the process, so this is my own father, Drew Arena. This is a guy you might have seen, William Barr. Um, Drew was an attorney at the DOJ in the 80s and 90s, and had a long, amazing career with justice. And frankly, my father was a good man, and so I trusted that perhaps, Barr had been brought back in as Attorney General and that he might do the right thing. And so, with sort of a prayer, I submitted requests to the OIG at Justice, asking them to look into it, explaining all the reasons why, the narrative didn't mesh with the fact pattern, that the evidence that was readily available in the public domain, none of it made sense. And hoped for something good to come of it. And so they said that it should be looked at by the FBI Inspections Division. And here we got a response from the Internal Affairs section, and they said that there was nothing there, nothing to look at, and that the matter had been resolved. The next thing that we're going to see is this is the picture of Barr next to my father. Well, in the years from when I filed the OIG complaint to now, I've learned some additional information. And one of the things I learned was listening to an interview by a gentleman named Chip Tatum. And Chip Tatum is being interviewed by Ted Gunderson in the late 90s. And Gunderson was, I believe, the Los Angeles FBI director, field office supervisor, or something to that effect. And Tatum was a Vietnam veteran and then a contract pilot for CIA. And he discusses in this interview the fact that
the cocaine press.
And did you have a picture of that?
In a place called Roos Roos. I have a picture of something.
Okay, we won't go into that. So George Bush was aware of it too. Ollie North was aware of it. How about Clinton?
Bush was absolutely aware of it, and I can say that because on the 24th of March 1985, William Barr, who would later become Attorney General.
Attorney General, know him well, know of him well.
William Barr actually called Vice President Bush via SATCOM and talked to him about the loss of over $100 million in assets of the enterprise. And we all know the enterprise today as being the company that, or the operation that Ollie North set up.
$100 million? And who got their grubby hands on that?
It was decided that there were three entities involved, not one particular person, but Noriega had involvement, that Barry Seal had involvement, and that the governor of Arkansas, who was involved in it at the time, Bill Clinton, had involvement in it.
In that audio, he's discussing Barr as an accomplice in the drug trafficking operation in the United States. The whole MENA connection, the importation of cocaine into Arkansas. He singles out Barr, Clinton, Noriega, Bush. It's the same cast of characters over and over again. This book was published in the late 90s, long before Barr ever returned to office. And so that was sort of a Rosetta Stone for me, to understand why it is that so many things are not resolved. It appears as though an American cartel has seized power, or at least had seized power, and was potentially blocking many, many things that should otherwise be readily resolved.
If you, Xander, had to sort of describe and maybe sum up what you think actually happened, I mean, piecing all of these things together, I always look at sort of Occam's razor. It usually always comes back to money and power, right? So does it make sense that the Chertoff group, Michael Chertoff, and these clowns would have orchestrated something like this in order to carry out a massive implementation of body scanners to make billions of dollars? I know it sounds like something out of a James Bond film, but we've seen it repeatedly now. With COVID, we've seen it repeatedly. So, but if you had to sum up what you think actually happened, what would you say?
Clayton, I'm going to be careful here because I don't want to point the finger at a particular person. It's not the public's role to do that. It's prosecutors' roles to do that. I can say that the evidence that is available certainly creates some suspicion. Profiteering is a real thing. Billions of dollars would certainly be a sizable prize. The other thing to consider is, just control of movement. Scanner tech, additional scanner tech, just a further erosion of our constitutional rights. There's a lot of potential motives.